All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. The first episode of the early days of Ethereum actually got quite good critical reception on LinkedIn and Twitter. I have a total of 9 YouTube subscribers now, which I think is not so bad for a first video. And there have been a few people who reached out who we've known a long time who really appreciated the content. One of them called it, essential viewing. So anyway, we're back for another episode. So remind everybody, I'm Kieran James Lubin, CEO of BlockApps, here with my co-founders. Victor, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Oh, okay. I'm Victor Wong, co-founder and Chief Product Officer at BlockApps.
I'm James Hermosdia, or Jim, CTO and founder, co-founder of BlockApps.
All right, thank you. And so I believe where we left, so I can't watch video of myself, so I forget exactly how we ended the last episode, but I believe we pretty much ended with the Ethereum launch, and there were some things we left out even prior to launch that we can kind of backtrack to a little bit and then go forward to all of the kind of after launch activity. So with that said, maybe I'll hand it to Victor to talk about the first ConsenSys DAppathon, which was June 2015, I believe.
Yeah, so that was, I think, the first actual hackathon building, what in those days were known as dApps. I guess some people still call it, but that seems to go out of favor with blockchain applications. So the first idea was to really try to build blockchain applications directly on Ethereum. And that was in the first ConsenSys office, which was like a very small co-working space in like Greenpoint, I think.
I would say it was on the water in Williamsburg. It was called Green Desks, maybe?
Green Desks, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's right next to the modern day Domino Park, maybe a block away from there or so.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. So, and it of course, Domino Park did not exist at that time. In fact, Domino Park went up really quickly and took me by surprise. I looked up one day and there was like a big kind of well-manicured park there.
Yeah. Well, they kind of walled it off. And so it just was like, I don't know. I thought it was like an abandoned site. And then one day, all of a sudden the wall was gone and there was a beautiful park there. So,
so at that event, which was, I think, 2 to 3 months before the actual launch of Ethereum, I will say, not the concepts were really interesting. People were coming up, and it was mostly, I think, interns that were interning at ConsenSys over that summer. And ConsenSys at this point was only like maybe 20 people at max. Like
20 or 30, yeah, that seems right.
Yeah, it was really, really small. And some great concepts came up, but like even with the stuff we built, we realized pretty quickly that no one could build anything in a short period of time. Like it was just impossible. Like very basic stuff like reading a variable off the blockchain was kind of impossible. Like you couldn't read the state off the blockchain, all this kind of stuff. So that kind of led into, like everything building in those days were incredibly hard. And that led into, so we decided at that event, we were going to, at the launch of Ethereum, we were going to do a bigger hackathon, and that became the second ConsenSys DAppathon, which kind of coincided with the launch of Ethereum. And it was us, the Java client, which I think was called EtherCamp at that time, and like other tools that were kind of combined together. But what was really interesting about that one was, it was bigger. Like I think the first one we had like 6 participants. The other one we had like, I think close to 30. But it introduced like a lot of ideas that would become more developed pretty quickly. Like the winner was a GameFi app. Like it really had that element of tokenized gameplay. There was a decentralized social app, I think, called Truther or something like that. And then there was like a traceability supply chain app in those early days, and that kind of all coincided with like the launch of Ethereum.
Yeah. So okay, and this so you're talking about the second one.
I'm talking about the second one. Yeah.
The second one, also the offices had shifted. So
Yep.
we had or ConsenSys, which we were kind of working as a part of at that time, had moved to a much larger office in Bushwick, which is I believe they still have a presence there, though they've gone mostly remote. I remember there's like a horse lineage app,
Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
pretty interesting, you know. Um, and we ended up actually hiring a couple people who participated in the hackathon, but that one was open to externals, right? So that was the big difference, and it actually was, you know, quite well attended. The room, I think, never had the greatest air conditioning, but it was really quite hot in there, if I recall. And you think that one was like 24 hours, or it was 2 days? I can't remember.
I think it was 2 days, and yeah, like the air conditioning thing. So we moved into that space to have the hackathon. Like, you know, ConsenSys was playing because they had outgrown that co-working space already. And so we moved into that space, which can, you know, was a reasonably sized room. Like you could probably get 80 to 100 people in that room, right? But yes, the air conditioning was terrible, and we had to frantically we only realized this after we got into the room, so we had to like frantically buy some and set them up.
Okay, I do have a memory of that.
Yeah, I don't know if you recall that, but yeah, we were like trying to like get those air conditioning units in place before like a ton of people showed up. Because yeah, like we were sweating when there were only like 5 people in the room.
These were the scrappy days.
Yeah.
Manually configuring air conditioning. I think the amount of like furniture assembly you do is like a good proxy for how scrappy you are in your startup journey.
There was a lot of furniture. I mean, we like it was basically an empty room when we moved in there, and I think we moved in there a day or two before the hackathon actually started. So we had to get everything up and running.
And was this to like sort of commemorate the launch, I think, or was it like right before the launch?
It was right. It actually, you know, if you recall at the time, we didn't know when the launch would be. Like the dates were always shifting, right? And we just said we kind of arbitrarily chose, like we wanted to actually synchronize it with the launch, but because we couldn't know exactly when the launch was, and even when they declared the date, it was still a little bit vague. Like we were like, is that going to actually happen? So we kind of at some point had to arbitrarily choose the date, and they more or less was the right date. Like I think it was off by maybe a day or two.
Jim, I might have asked you this last episode, but I'll ask again. Do you remember, one, trying to predict the launch, and could you explain how? And two, there was some complicated mechanism for how the launch would actually happen, because it's hard for like a decentralized group to decide on a launch time. And I can't remember that at all.
You were mentioning it in the last video, and I didn't remember this, but I don't doubt it. It sounds correct. You were saying we were looking through the Git commits at the time.
We were, yes. You know, you made this plot. It was like commits by day, and as like the commits, and you like extrapolated it forward. I think probably got within a couple days of the launch date. But okay, so I have to, yeah, I still don't know how they like set the clock on the first block, so to speak. Maybe we can like dig this up. There was something they did, and that we had
probably in our DMs. I wish I thought to look between the first and second video to find the actual discussion that we had. Maybe the graph is in there.
Yeah, that's very funny. The Slack is a treasure trove of interesting things. All right. So it launched. And I kind of felt like there was a sort of and then what going on. You know, it took a little time for things to get going. And it, you know, it obviously it's just been a smashing success, right? It's just sort of the reality of a new platform. You sort of get it out there, you see what people do, you learn from it, and you know it took a minute for the activity to kick in. Jim,
I remember like a lot of people around us at the time had been buying a lot of pre-sale Ether beforehand, and so the day it came out, I think they were expecting it to like have a huge jump in value immediately. And when like, you know, a couple of weeks had gone by and it was only still like 20 cents an Ether. So I remember people around us were kind of like, some of the people there were like, oh, this thing was a flop. It's never going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just psychologically, yeah, the expectations were super high. There was this concept floating around ConsenSys of day one dApps. Like you had to be ready right for the launch because it was a land grab and things were going to the moon. And it turned out to not quite be obviously again smashing success. But yeah, the price was like under $1 for a little bit, and then around $1 for like a while, I believe. And I did want to mention so. I had to look this up. So the first ICO, whatever you want to call it, that was on Ethereum. Obviously, Ethereum did its own crowd sale, but it was like they took in Bitcoin, and it was something like 2,000 Ether to 1 Bitcoin at the time, which I believe at the time was like 20 or 30 cents, and then it had gone up to $1 on launch, which is already a pretty good return, But that is what it is. The first ICO apparently was Augur. And I knew the Augur guys a little bit. I was digging through the Crypto Economicon videos. I believe 1 or 2 of them presented or were on panels at Crypto Economicon. For folks who are listening to this, Crypto Economicon was a conference that we had in January 2015 that involved a lot of the people who then, including Vitalik and some of the other Ethereum folks, who subsequently created really big and interesting, mostly layer 1 projects in the Ethereum space, but others as well. So the videos are actually up. I tweeted a couple of them, but there was apparently, I think I created a YouTube channel like in 2015 and uploaded all those. I definitely remember getting them recorded. So check those out if that's of interest. So Augur was the first, I guess, of the prediction markets platforms. There since have been a couple of new ones that have popped up that seem to be popular. There was also this sort of competing project called Truthcoin. And I was kind of confused about how the two related to each other. I think there was no formal relation, though. I remember meeting up. There's a guy named Matt Liston I met who I checked his LinkedIn. He's been in a couple different places. So I think Augur, maybe we should look up who actually founded Augur. So Jeremy Gardner, I've known over the years. And I met him in San Francisco with Vitalik. Because Vitalik was staying at what was termed at the time the Crypto Castle. And it's kind of what you would imagine, sort of like a co-working, co-living crypto space and not everyone there was working on Augur. They were all working on different things. It's kind of common thing to do.
Well, I think if you hear the term Crypto Castle now, people would imagine an actual castle versus what you're describing, which is more like a dormitory.
Yes, it was more like a dorm. I mean, it was a nice little house. I can't remember. It might have been like adjacent to the Mission in San Francisco. So Vitalik would stay there sometimes. Joey Krug, I've probably met 2 or 3 times over the years. I'm not even sure if I ever met Jack Peterson. So those are the 3 founders of Augur. So I guess they had, they were good friends with Vitalik and were just sort of had realized early on that it would be easier to develop on Ethereum than it would be to try to do something with Bitcoin, which was kind of the predominant suggestion at the time. But they did the first on Ethereum crowdfund, I guess right after launch. The Wikipedia is saying August 2015. Which is really, really early. I don't know if I believe this Wikipedia page. It says, soon after the platform launched, users had created the death pools or assassination markets on famous people. So back in 2015, every discussion about blockchain eventually led both to prediction markets and then this sort of uncensorability, you can't shut it down, would lead then to assassination markets. Assassination markets being you bet on the day someone dies, and then someone takes the other side of that bet, kills them, and collects on it. So apparently there actually were assassination markets created on Augur, according to this Wikipedia page. I'd have to look into that. I'm a little bit dubious. But in any case, I guess Augur then blazed the trail, sort of after Ethereum did with its successful crowd sale, for the wave of ICOs that came later. But yeah, so TruthCoin was also this competing project. I just remember meeting up with Matt at like a Berkeley coffee shop and talking about both Augur and TruthCoin had some sort of, machine learning, slightly like computer science graph theoretic way of like determining what the truth was. So like you take a bunch of votes from a bunch of people, but then determine the principal components of how the voting is, then extract the truth from there. So it sounded like very, high-end math, mechanistic, which it was very common of the space. Every like, the crypto has a lot of these like, and I was in the math department at Berkeley, a lot of these like mathematician types who like kind of came in and wanted to create like really complicated schemes and mechanisms and all that sort of stuff that had provable theoretical properties for something interesting about this space. But yeah, so they must have launched it like right away. That's very interesting.
I remember us talking to them at some point, and they were developing that. Like they did want to be a day one dApp, I remember, and they were. I think the
platform went live 2018. The Wikipedia page says, but they did the crowd sale like basically right away.
Right.
Yeah. So should we go on to DEVCON1, which I guess I can talk about. So kind of concurrently while all this is happening, we started to work a bunch. So ConsenSys had a business development team, a bit of a mix of marketing, BD, actual sales, et cetera, that was starting to generate interest from big companies in the technology. So, for us ourselves, we definitely worked with companies far more than sort of the crypto public for, most of the history of the company. Still don't really work with the crypto public today. But, ConsenSys was kind of conflicted on this front. So they, while they had sort of pure blockchain native projects and eventually in big numbers, they also had an enterprise arm, which is really more consulting oriented, although they kind of ended up sort of backfilling what they saw demand for with products at times. But in any case, the BD folks were reaching out to everybody, and they actually got a fair bit of interest from Microsoft. And I think Microsoft had already been kind of watching the Ethereum revolution and, seeing it as something interesting, the new front of the cloud war, perhaps. And so, we got to working with them, and actually maybe for the technical part of this, I could kind of transition. But basically, so ConsenSys had a couple, preferred projects, which had the low level, I mean like the blockchain client itself, infrastructure that could be deployed on cloud platforms. And maybe, so that ended up being basically us and the Java folks. Vic, do you want to take any? I think you were saying before.
Yeah, sure. So they were interested in kind of being able to deploy one of the clients that we had. We had the Haskell client and then the Java folks. They were actually more interested in the Java folks. I should take a step back here. Just mentioning that DEVCON1 almost didn't happen, if you recall, right? Because it was in this low period, and the Ethereum Foundation was kind of running out of money because, this is why the launch had to happen when it happened. And in that low period, they were like, still trying to preserve a lot of cash. And so it almost didn't happen. And I remember a lot of people inside ConsenSys were like, no, we have to bring this up and make an event out of this. I think Andrew Keys was leading the charge in that, really saying we got to do this. And then this Microsoft thing kind of bundled into that, right? So it was us and the Java client. And my background was in my previous company, I had tried to work with Microsoft in building apps, when they had their first mobile platform. And it took me like 6 months to get a meeting, and I had a cousin who was like a VP at Microsoft. So it was really hard. So it was amazing to me that they were just coming to us and they wanted to launch something with us in 2 months. And I think at that point we decided, okay, this is a huge opportunity. We're going to drop everything and focus on that launch, which turned out to be the launch of blockchain as a service. But oddly enough, the Java guys started and then they just kind of faded away. Like they weren't really interested in kind of pursuing it. They just had other things going on. So we like went over it. So by the time DEVCON1 happened, the only thing that was working was, our client it was ready on the cloud. You could download it and you could start building on it right away. And I remember like we started to get like downloads immediately. People started to get, people using it immediately. But that's also in that run up, that was like when kind of we realized, and Microsoft realized, like, if we're going to make this as a developer tool, it can't, connect to the public Ethereum network because people wouldn't be able to get Ether. Like, it was quite hard to get Ether at that point. There weren't really that many exchanges or anything to go on. So that's kind of how we kind of created like private Ethereum, and private enterprise, what became known as private Ethereum or enterprise Ethereum. So that kind of all led up. And then the launch itself in London, when we got up with Microsoft, I think people were shocked that Microsoft was into it.
So I just looked that up and I didn't have it in our little outline, but I had forgotten about this. So I think Coinbase listed Ether like mid 2016, right? I'm seeing May 24th, 2016. Yeah. So, and I guess like Kraken was the popular exchange at the time,
I think it was Poloniex.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Poloniex still exists.
And I just remember there was like the chat function on Poloniex, and like, man, like that was like crazy. Like that was Discord before there was Discord.
Oh wait, hold on. Circle bought it maybe, and then it seems to have shut it down. Anyway, I'm confused by all this, but yeah, so it was sketchy for sure. Yeah. There was like a whale chat box. I never really used it, but I would like see it on people's computers and all that sort of thing. It was difficult to get in and out of Ether for a while. Jim, were you gonna say something?
I'm just kind of remembering back then. Remind me, because I'm sort of like not sure if I've got this right, but I think maybe you're downplaying the Java thing a little bit. I think if I remember right, Microsoft guys were pretty mad at that time. Am I misremembering that?
No, you're not. Well, the thing is, they really want something that they could pitch to companies, and companies use Java, right? So they were like really so like when we kind of like were like we just dropped everything and just focused on that. And I remember like we sort of had the internal mantra, like, we got to get on stage and be able to write a DApp in like 30 seconds. Like that was our internal mantra.
They had like pre-announced something or something. And then the Java guys sort of disappeared or something. If I remember.
They pre-announced that, they were going to show like the Java client and the Haskell client. And we were like the runner-up. Like they were like, I think they kind of accepted us because we were willing to work really hard, and the Java guy, like, I think they knew that they needed a backup.
The other thing I remember about Microsoft is that there was a little bit of like tension within there, because they were just launching Azure at that time. Yeah. And at the same time, they had blockchain people, and the blockchain people really wanted to focus on the blockchain side of it, and the Azure people wanted to like use this as a way to promote the new platform. So there was always a little bit of friction within.
Yeah, I mean, like, I remember, like, I think Marley Gray was really driving those efforts inside Microsoft at the time, and Theo Teeter, like, they were like really, really pushing it. And I remember like they were trying to get people in the room to talk to us, and some of them wouldn't even come in the room. Like, I mean, it was probably, like you said, they were launching Azure. So that's a huge project. I'm sure they were just busy with other stuff. But we spent a lot of time in their New York office. I remember we were like going there all the time.
Yeah.
I'm seeing the Azure launch as 2010. I checked it, but it did feel much more nascent than it is today. Like Amazon got out, AWS got out there and like took the whole market. And then Azure was kind of like in a catch-up mode, but I think it might have even like exceeded AWS revenues at some
They
point.
were running around one of the conferences, I can't remember which one, handing out free passes to Azure to
It
everyone.
was that conference, DEVCON1.
Okay.
Yeah, they were handing it out, and that's why they wanted to make sure we were on their marketplace. So like they could hand out this free pass and you could get the, you could get the our client up and running and start building something right away. And that was like a revelation to a lot of people. I remember like dozens of companies were like starting in that first week.
Their devious plan worked on us, that we grabbed a whole bunch of free passes. And then a year later, we were like giving them like $10,000 a month to stay on.
It definitely works.
Oh, they get you. Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember like the day after the Microsoft announcement, there was a spike in the price. And we were like, I think we just did that.
The price, you mean the Microsoft stock price?
No. I meant the
Ether price.
Ethereum price.
I think it was both, actually.
Yeah, I think both.
Memory of the Microsoft stock price like slightly ticking.
Yeah,
up.
I think they both went up, and we were like, "Hey, I think we actually did that."
What? So like either went from 20 cents to 30 cents?
No, I think it actually went significantly up. I remember like it was, I think it might have like doubled for a day or something like that.
20 cents to 40 cents.
Maybe, I think it was like $1 to $1.80, or I don't remember the price.
Check it out. It's hard to see. It's funny, the price range is like so.
Yeah, because the prices.
Oh, okay. So it's interesting, right? So DevCon's like December, right?
Yeah,
something like that. It's around $1.
Yeah, there it is.
January
Yeah.
It starts ticking up. Like,
Yeah.
And I think we definitely got calls related to the Microsoft announcement into January.
Yeah,
for sure. So we probably had something to do with it. Yeah, you never know really what's causing price action.
Yeah.
But
I'm joking, but I just remember like sort of the mentality within was that until it was up to $20, people thought it was a flop, and somehow when it hit $20, everybody around me all of a sudden got really excited. Then,
yeah, the average person, buys high, sells low. So yeah, that's pretty successful. It's funny, and it was still low. Okay, so moving along, kind of on the back of the enterprise announcement, the Microsoft announcement, we started to get customers, and a lot of it was like enterprises that were fairly early in their journey and wanted just some advice on blockchain technology. Some of them were actually ready to implement something. I don't know, Vic, you took a whole lot of phone calls.
Oh man, yeah.
Do you want to comment on any of that?
I mean, it was kind of amazing. Like now the numbers in relative size seem pretty small, but in the first couple months, we went from 0 to like dozens of companies calling us, right? And the amazing thing to me was they had actually tried our software. Like they had played around, and like I remember over and over, people were like, "Oh, like we've been working on a blockchain project for the last 2 years and haven't been able to build anything, and now we can do something," right? So I remember like we were getting them from financial companies and like resource company and mining companies, and like it was like all across the spectrum of people trying things, because I don't think they really knew what they wanted to do, but they wanted an easy way to get in, and for the first time they had it.
Gotcha. Do you remember? So I believe I'm trying to keep this straight. So, I remember the project Slockit was sort of being marketed at DEVCON1, but I believe it's a lot of the same people as the DAO. And do you remember? Like, I think they presented, but I'm having a hard time keeping it straight.
So Slockit was this sort of IoT kind of strange thing that you could unlock a lock, but it was structured around what actually became the DAO. Like I think they invented the concept, not the concept, but I think they practically created a DAO in order to run this lock. And then they realized, well, I think they realized, well, we don't actually need the lock. Like the DAO is the most important thing, and the actual lock thing is not that interesting. So yeah, it was 100% the same people. Like they were introducing both ideas at the same time.
So let me transition into the DAO part. I'm going to go slightly out of order here. So Victor, what was the DAO?
So the DAO was basically, it was kind of like a investment fund on the Ethereum blockchain, right? So basically people would put like money into this contract, and this contract would basically fund the goal of it was it would fund different projects. But it started to like consume a huge amount of the overall ether supply. I think it was as high as like 20 or 25% of the entire ether supply got locked up into this contract.
Yeah, I'm looking on the Wikipedia right now. So the part of the reason I thought of it in this sequence is like looking at the price action. Part of it is that the supply, the extant ether supply went down because okay, so as of May 2016, the DAO had attracted nearly 14% of all Ether tokens issued to date. So they ran a crowd sale, and a crowd sale raised $34 million. 34 million by May 10th, 2016. More than 50 by May 12th, over 100 by May 15th. So sometimes the dynamics of these ICOs, this is one thing. One, it's kind of crazy, but like one thing that blockchains seem to do that it's really difficult to do with other technologies is to have this sort of really large scale collaboration, and in this case to pool capital, basically. Yeah. So I suppose there was some sort of virality going on. People are talking about the DAO, and you just see this like enormous movement of funds sort of overnight. And so okay, they end up holding by May 21st, 2016, over $150 million in Ether from over 10,000 people, which is about, it says, according to the article, about 14% of all Ether tokens issued at that time.
Yeah, okay.
So it was really fast, right? Like it took everybody by surprise. I remember, I think I had a meeting that the enterprise folks at ConsenSys had set up with, I'm going to say the people at BVVA. We're forgetting last names, but I think it was with like Scarlett and Carlos. And I don't think you went to this one, Vic. I think you weren't in town. But they were just like, it just caught everyone's attention. It was crazy, And we were talking a bit about like operational use cases for the bank. But then there was also like, there was a sense that like, this is where the future is. Like the money just moved, like there were no really, there's heavy subscription agreements and, all that sort of thing. And, it was also a cautionary tale of what was to come over the next couple of years. So by June, the people discovered that you could exploit the DAO to siphon off the funds.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything about that? But beyond, it was crazy.
So you had all the supply locked into this contract, and I think the hack was like, so there was this massive race there was a flaw in the contract logic, and because it's immutable, the smart contract couldn't be changed, right? And when people realized there was this massive race between the people who were trying to extract the money out of the contract and the people who actually worked on the DAO itself. So it was like this, but the people who were successful at kind of extracting the money pulled out a lot of it. Like, I think, I don't remember the number, but I think it was like a huge amount of the value they were able to pull that out.
Yeah.
Now, the ironic thing was that it got pulled out and put into an account, and everyone knew where it went because, you know, everything on the blockchain is completely transparent, but no one could do anything about it. Like they couldn't take the money out. And so the money was just sitting there basically. That got like, it was like it got stolen and left on the side of the street or something. And no one knew what to do about this situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, okay. I'm kind of looking back on it. So it was, yeah, it blew up, and it also caused the creation. So I remember there was at this time, and we had to implement this in our software, a hard fork debate, because so it's pretty early. It's like less than a year after Ethereum launched. Probably a lot of the, you know, big Ether holders participated in this. You know, they've lost significant funds, maybe all of their funds. And the question was like, do you make people whole, or do you stick true to the absolute, you know, immutability of, you know, in the classic blockchain sense, where, you know, it's totally buyer beware. Shouldn't have put your Ether in this contract if you weren't gonna, you know, if you weren't prepared to lose it. And the refund group won, you know. So in a sense, I mean, both like Ethereum, Bitcoin, really all the projects are governed to an extent, right, by the people who develop the software and kind of on an ongoing basis discuss additions to the protocol, you know, et cetera, right? And, you know, even in the early days of Bitcoin, I was not really around for this, but supposedly they had to be extremely creative about about keeping the protocol running while not ever reverting any of the history, right? So I don't believe they've ever done a hard fork of the nature described here, though there have been, maybe not sponsored by the founders. Obviously, there are forks of Bitcoin now, Bitcoin Cash, you know, all that sort of thing. And so the Ethereum community elected to, or the foundation or whatever that is, the elected to sort of forcibly revert the funds. There's just like almost like a credit as of a certain block number. So everyone got their funds back. Jim had to code it. Maybe I helped a little bit. No, I was not coding anymore at this point. And so then Ethereum Classic was like the hard line. Like, we're sticking to the immutability. Sorry, Jim, were you going to say something? Oh, no. Victor, you're going to say something.
No.
Yeah. And so Ethereum Classic got some backers. You know, I think maybe famously, I think Barry Silbert was in their Ethereum Classic, maybe still is. And eventually it was, I think someday, Victor, you told me this, right? Someday later, it had a hard fork itself, right? When some issue was discovered with the protocol. Is that correct?
I think I don't know if it was a hard fork or a soft fork, but yeah, there have been like, you know, there have been debates inside the Ethereum Classic community too on how to implement different changes into the protocol, right? It's not just running, like there's constantly I think Bob Somerville of the Ethereum Classic Collective knows more about this stuff than I do.
Interesting. Yeah, maybe I could follow up on exactly how this went down. But I think also, I think Ethereum Classic maybe was mining forever philosophically.
Yeah.
Whereas Ethereum switched over to proof of stake like a year ago, you know, year and a half. Yeah. So yeah, they were more kind of although there was, okay, you know, I just Googled it. Here's a June 28th Cointelegraph article that says Ethereum Classic devs announce upcoming hard fork, yada, yada. So they at least subsequently did some amount of hard forking, but, you know, interesting nonetheless. Funny thing also, when this hard fork happens, right, it's, you know, you don't, this is a silly comment from someone who's, you know, fairly compliance focused, right? Like, what's the tax treatment of a hard fork? Like you had say you had some tokens on one chain and then they morph and now you have tokens on both chains. I think it's like airdrops too, or like ordinary income, which means whether or not you wanted those hard fork coins, you probably have to pay taxes on them if you can access and liquidate them, but you have to pay them whether or not you liquidate. It's not just capital gains, so
Oh, interesting.
Quite a strange test of our system that we've seen with blockchain, because they fork all the time. There's lots of airdrops, etc. And you might not even be aware. All right, so that was the DAO. I want to this was crazy. Like I still kind of can't believe this happened, and it's happened way bigger and differently later. But it's it was quite a moment, all of this.
Well, I looked up the current price, and in current dollars, it would be roughly the equivalent of $30 billion.
Oh.
If you think about it. So yeah, it'd be huge, because just Ethereum was so small at the time, right?
Yeah. Okay, I want to take you to the second CoinDesk ConsenSys hackathon. And again, hand it to Victor for everything you recall. Also, we have some pictures from that time. We could just show some of that on screen if you.
Yeah, I found it from CoinDesk. Let me see if I can still find them. But so what I remember of it is that it was, I think it was one of the first CoinDesk ConsenSys events, which subsequently became huge. And then so they kind of had two events around it. One was a hackathon, which we were part of, and we were like one of the main platforms that was participating in it. And then there was the event itself, which was, I think, at the Ritz. Like both events were in Times Square. Like the hackathon came first at Microsoft in Times Square, and then the event was kind of a couple blocks away in the hotel. And I remember that, like, during the hackathon itself, we were all in these like different conference rooms and there was, like early Hyperledger and some other, I can't remember who the other clients were, but there were like competing clients that were not Ethereum based. And there was a pretty good turnout. I think like over 100 people showed up, like a lot of people kind of showed up. And our room got so crowded, we had to like co-opt another boardroom in order to kind of like build. So like, I think we got like a significant majority of the developers building stuff on our platform, which was super exciting. And I remember kind of walking by the rooms that like Hyperledger had, or I'm trying to remember what the other client had, and like, there weren't very many people in there. It seemed like the people that were in there were like people who were working for them. So that was really, really exciting. Though at the end, we didn't win. At least someone building on our stack didn't win, because I think the winner was actually something that was getting built way before that hackathon existed, which was, technically against the rules, but we didn't hold anyone to that.
This is Victor asserts, if we lost, it's because someone else cheated. So
exactly.
That's how we feel.
That's at least how I felt at the time. Whether or not that's completely true, it's that memory is subjective. That's all I'm saying. Right. So.
And the rest of the conference.
Oh, and then the rest of the conference. So that, I think, was like the first shiny big blockchain conference, right? Like, you had, I remember Vitalik speaking, they launched, I think, the first Hyperledger app there, and a bunch of, there was a bunch of activity. Like, it was a really interesting combination, because most of the other conferences like DEVCON are really developer focused, but this, you could really see a lot of businesses becoming interested. And the thing I most remember about that conference is that we were like pulled into a room and at one point, and that room was basically, in the room was the head of Hyperledger, John Wolpert, and Vitalik were in that room, and they were like, "Hey, we heard that you guys have an enterprise-ready version of Ethereum that can switch between the public net and like private blockchains, right?" And like I remember Wolpert at the time was like, "My engineers claim that this is completely impossible." Like, and Jim, I think you like pulled out your laptop and you're like, "Here it is. Like, I'm going to show you. Like, this is how it works, and like you can start building on it and everything." And there was this conversation going back and forth between Wolpert and Vitalik about, I think, Hyperledger supporting Ethereum, and it kind of ended. What I remember of it was it ended with. I think Vitalik was, he always wears an Ethereum t-shirt, right? And Wolpert is about 3 sizes larger than Vitalik, but
interesting. I think Vitalik is very tall, and
yeah.
John is stockier, substantial. If they had a bench press competition, I expect there would be a pretty big differentiation, between what John could bench and what Vitalik could bench.
I think you're right. Like, we're not talking that John is unfit. He's just like much larger, and Vitalik is still quite skinny, right? So like John was like 3 sizes before. And I think it was Andrew Keys that like pointed to the t-shirt and like, "Vitalik, take that shirt off and give it to John," because he was about to walk on stage, and like it was like a muscle shirt on him. It was like so tight, it was like a compression shirt, and he went on stage, and that was like, people were kind of shocked that like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, this is the head of Hyperledger, and now he's wearing an Ethereum t-shirt." And it's interesting because what eventually that led to Hyperledger actually supporting Ethereum type clients like Burrow.
Yeah, I would add, in talking to, obviously we spoke to John occasionally over the years, and he actually went on to join ConsenSys later. I don't really know what he's up to today. I don't think he's there anymore. But he had sort of a sense of like not wanting to be on the wrong side of history. Like he was always talking about like IBM's embrace of Linux instead of like pushing really hard on a continual basis with its own operating system. So they just put a ton of open source software development in Linux, and of course it probably helped them, have something to run on their mainframes, which is still actually a big business for them today. And so he was always like debating back and forth, like, should we do our own thing? And it was at least mostly open source. Should we go the Ethereum way? What do we do? And I think this was, like perhaps the best illustration of that conflict. I think IBM has since, it was formidable for a while and sort of scary as a competitor and all that sort of thing. And I don't hear that much blockchain noise out of them anymore. I think they've shifted resources and all that sort of thing.
By the way, I did find the picture from that first hackathon. So, this is off of CoinDesk, but here's the picture, at the mic. And this was one of the rooms, and we had to co-op another room. Like this was very early in the process.
Yeah, I remember this one.
And here I am sitting in the middle of it over here, but yes. But yeah, it grew really, really rapidly.
All righty. Close to rounding up here, but got a couple more things. So things are moving along. 2016, there's some kind of organic momentum. I know, like, we hired a lot of people during this period of time. We're our software's been used in enterprise projects. We're kind of like ramping up headcount because people are using our software more. And so I'm looking at this and like, I can't believe that the time frames were this tight. So DEVCON2 is September 2016. And so it's in Shanghai, right? So I do remember having to deal with all the visa stuff. Thankfully ConsenSys dealt with that. we were kind of doing a capital raise, sort of our first sort of seedish one at that time. But it was it felt like a coming out party. I don't know. I think what do you guys recall? What are some of your impressions from DEVCON 2, kind of, et cetera?
There was some big attack on Ethereum. I'm trying to remember the details right now, but I remember in the morning, and lots of stuff was happening on the business front there. But I remember like waking up and suddenly I was just like completely involved in like digging in with the Haskell client and figuring out what was going on and what changes we had to make. So
I do remember
it was like some transactions that slowed the clients down being created, right? And yeah, I think like I guess it was like due to the way the data structures worked to some extent, it was like hard to make them process fast. I can't recall, but yeah, it was funny that it was right around that time. Also, okay, sorry, good.
Well, the funny thing that I sort of remember is like, and maybe you're about to talk about this, but the EEA was sort of formed during that conference, and Victor somehow in the morning grabbed me and he's like, I've got all these meetings and I'd like you to come along too. But I was like, I had my laptop and I was like trying to dig into the tech with all the stuff that was going on there. So I sort of sat in the corner in this coffee shop and I was like programming all day. And then at the end of the day, I kind of was like, what were all those meetings you had? And Victor essentially is like, oh yeah, we just formed the EEA. So
well, yeah, it was funny. I think really it was Jeremy Miller, who I think later went on to become chief of staff at ConsenSys, who really kind of drove that. Like there had been a previous attempt, I think by Matt Spoke, to create some sort of group of enterprises to work together on standards, and that never kind of went anywhere. But then
I have no memory of this. So could you did Matt was at Deloitte.
Matt was at Deloitte at the time, and Deloitte was early into blockchain. Like, so they were at DEVCON1. They were really early into blockchain and kind of building up a practice. Ironically, in the Toronto office, right? So like they're really focused on it, and so they were quite early and quite knowledgeable. And so they were trying to kind of, at some point, they had started this, effectively a consortium of companies who want to use Ethereum, right? And then there was us, where we were working with Microsoft, that was happening sort of organically. But we realized that there was the need for companies to kind of collaborate, to work together on this kind of stuff. And Jeremy Miller just thought, like, this is in working. Like, what's happening now isn't working. We got to get some, proper structure, because I think it was just an announcement on the Ethereum Foundation site, but no one was really driving it. So during that day, we like kind of aggregated a bunch of people in that coffee shop. Like it was like literally all happening beside you. And there was like Jeremy, John Whelan was there from Santander, like Matt Spoke came in. I think Marley came in at one point, and like James Lazarus came in, and we were all kind of saying, okay, we need this organization. We need to get this together. And it was all happening at this coffee shop that was at the Starbucks that was just literally outside the conference center. And it really kind of all came together. And it was amazing to me because it was like, right, like sort of by the end of the day, we were like, yes, we're going to form this group that eventually became the EEA.
So I want to add some peripheral details. So we get to Shanghai, right? You get this, we're jet lagged. It's a hefty flight,
Yeah.
You get this card, and the card says something like, aliens not going to hotels, aliens being like, people who are not Chinese who are in the country, must report to the police within 72 hours or something. And I was like, does that mean like the hotels are like part of the police? Like I don't know. I assume plenty of listeners will not have been to mainland China. And then you kind of gets to the hotel. So it was like an hour drive, whenever the main airport is, to the hotel. Shanghai is vast. Like there are high rises along the highway the whole way, and they just get denser as you get close to where we. Do you know? Is there a name for the neighborhood we we're staying in? Like the old stock exchange, I believe, which had been converted to a
Yeah,
hotel.
we were right downtown. I'm trying to remember where we stayed at the time. The conference was right downtown along, I think close to the Bund. That's the area next to the river. And
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right.
like,
So the
it was
Bund
like
is the
across the,
European side, and
Yeah.
then the other side is like brand new.
yeah, that's Pudong. Like that's like
Oh.
sort of, you know, originally was the suburbs basically. And you know, like I've founded 2 companies in China. So I think I was like the China expert there and like taking people around. And yeah, like I mean, well, if you're not staying in a hotel, the government wants to know how to reach you. And so if you're like staying in the Airbnb and stuff, you need to like if you stay in a hotel, the hotel takes care of all of that stuff for you. Basically, they just but like if you're staying in a hotel, and we were all staying in sort of a small hotel, but I remember like taking you guys for like a Chinese breakfast, and like you guys loved it. Like we went back to that same place. Like I was like, there are
It was
better
really
places.
good. I think we went
Yeah.
to like a couple holes in the wall too.
Yeah,
And
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. So
it was very
so
good.
it was like this hole in the wall place, and I was just kind of trying to give you the flavor, and you guys really liked it. So we kept on. The other thing I remember about that conference is that um the Wall Street Journal was there, and I remember I got quoted from them as saying, "I think China is going to be one of the biggest blockchain markets in the world." You know, and this is before they started their own digital currency and really kind of went in on creating their own blockchain. But I remember people thought it was absolutely bonkers when I said that because they hadn't done anything. Like they was like so early in the journey. But as you said, this all happened really fast.
Yeah. I'd also mention, so we announced a project we were working on and it was getting close to completion with BHP Billiton. Which is a big time project and kind of the first of our supply chain work. Our kind of champion at BHP is a guy named Tyler Smith, very smart guy, geophysicist, blockchain enthusiast. And so the announcement was great. It definitely got everyone excited about the technology, helped us close the financing at that time, et cetera. So we're all on stage. But also I want to mention that Tyler, I think he'd been to Shanghai before. And, you know, as one does when one's in Asia, you try to get some suits, you know, for lower cost, right? And he kind of told me like his algorithm. There's something nearby called, I believe, the fabric market. Is that very big?
Yeah, that's right.
And he sort of like hung out there for a little bit. He told me, and he watched where like the Chinese business people went, and they all went up to like the 3rd floor to this particular guy. And so he kind of showed us where that was. I think you got some too, right? Or
I did. And that algorithm worked out really well. That is also my algorithm for finding good places to eat. Like I follow taxi, like the way I found that hole in the wall, like, you know, I lived in Beijing, so I've been to Shanghai plenty of times, but I didn't know near the hotel where to eat. And I just kind of follow where taxi drivers wind up stopping. And if that's the place, you know, they probably have pretty good food there.
yeah. And he told me also the last time he had done a China trip, he went like 10 hours by buses, trains, boats to get like the best silk blankets, which were somewhere near Shanghai. I was never able to look into this and get them back. So similarly, he kind of, you know, followed the local knowledge will get you a long way, I guess.
Well, nowadays it's all high-speed rail. Like I remember,
Yeah.
like I remember at various times traveling through China and being like, you know, having like 18-hour train rides and stuff like that, which were brutal. Because like in many times I just had to stand during that entire time in a crowded thing. But yeah, now it's high-speed rail. It's amazing. Like it's faster than planes in most cases.
Yeah. In any case, it was an experience, right? So we did some business development there, had a lot of meetings with prospective customers, investors, all that sort of thing. It's definitely tough to do business in China for listeners considering it and not from China. I don't recommend it unless you really know what you're doing. But it was quite the trip. Like, I actually had to leave a little bit early for some events I was doing, I think with Intel actually.
Yeah, that's right.
But it was, crazy. It made, it made things for a tech project. Ethereum was actually kind of Europe centric, but I think Asia, almost bigger uptake there. So it made it feel really global. And it was just kind of funny, just to see all of this happening, at the same time. Like the internet kind of worked, it was cool to hang out in Shanghai as well. And just totally different planet, felt like. All right. I think with that segue, we could probably wrap it up with the EA leading up to the EA launch. So the idea had been hatched in a Starbucks in Shanghai. And basically, kind of the quote, I guess Jeremy was fond of saying, is that like every innovation lab is using Ethereum now. They're watching us and they're each hacking it their own way to be something they can actually use, right? So no one wanted to connect to the public net at that time. It's definitely changed some, over the years, especially with the, NFT revolution, et cetera. And, so there was not a lot of technological reuse going on in, the duct tape that, various enterprises were putting on the software to make it work for their needs. Probably most notable in that set of enterprises was JP Morgan, which we can talk about in more detail. But a lot of them were doing it. The folks at the Innovation Lab at Santander, who we know pretty well, were doing their own thing. It was quite interesting to observe the goings on. And Vic, do you remember? Okay, so there were like a couple face-to-face meetings that were like very hush-hush. I think Microsoft hosted some of them around the launch of the EA. So you've kind of napkined out the idea in Starbucks, but then what was the next thing that happened?
So then there were a series of meetings that were kind of really about structuring. So like, how did we want to structure this organization? And, what composition should it be? Like, should it be all big companies? Should it be, like how much of the tech should be involved? How much of the, company side should be involved? And how it should work? Like, should it be a free organization? Should we charge membership? Should, and all of that was on the table. But the amazing thing about those meetings is they did start small, but they eventually like wound up to be like 40 people in the room, like all the major clients, like all of these things. Because I think at the time, really where the interest was in terms of real world applications of the Ethereum blockchain was in the enterprise space. Like they were willing to kind of make investments into that. So like everyone was kind of participating into that. And so there were like these like really, really active discussions. And ultimately we just kind of had to set a line in the sand and make a launch basically. And that kind of led to it launching in sort of early 2017. But in terms of time frame, you got to think that like it was only a little over a year when we launched with a single big company. And then at the launch of EA, it was like 40 companies that were.
Yeah, I remember 28 or something like that. There was a logo wall that was nice. They showed, it was really substantial.
And it was in the Brooklyn JPM office. And, like it was like a lot of big players. And this really kind of told the world like, hey, this is serious. Like this is something that should happen. So I it was really, really exciting. But yeah, the negotiations around it were really complicated and in some cases heated. I remember like one of the biggest negotiations was between the different clients, right? Like there was us and there were other clients who were trying to figure out like, how do we share information between us?
Yeah. I'd also add, okay, so JP Morgan, when did they announce Quorum?
That's a good question. I don't, I think it was,
Probably before the EA launch, but I'm not sure.
yeah, I know they had a blockchain team that ironically also were working in Haskell. So they were, and eventually we wound up doing work on Quorum too. So there was like, we had been talking to them a while, but I can't remember when the official launch of Quorum was.
I have some memory that they demoed something at and ConsenSys might have helped like the front end of the demo. I can't quite recall, but I believe that they demoed something at the launch, which was what, like, it was either February or March 2017, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think they must have announced it by then. So Quorum was a flavor of Ethereum, or a flavor of Enterprise Ethereum, where they'd taken the Go Ethereum client and done things like add privacy and so that it was easier to obscure data, and there was like a messaging layer it had, et cetera. And it's similar things we developed over the years, just as in response to the privacy preferences and needs of big enterprises, basically. So they all wanted to use the technology. They didn't want a native token. They didn't want too much detail leaking to potentially competitors or even just trading counterparties, et cetera. They, a lot of people at the same time developed kind of similar features to service the enterprise need. But yeah, so the event, 30 big enterprises there, or 30 companies, a few startups, a lot of big enterprises. I think the membership of the EEA peaked at like 500 companies or something really large, right? Like
It was in the hundreds. I don't remember.
300 or something like that. So like on the back of this announcement, the business side, got pretty excited. And, as later in that year, there's also crypto run-ups. Kind of everyone wanted to be involved. But I think of the EA launch as sort of the end of the beginning. If you look back at the price trend also, hold on, bringing it back up. I closed it. So let's say it's February here. It does start to really tick up and hit into kind of a fever pitch 2017, 2018, right? So
yeah,
it's already at this time, around $10. But it really goes dramatically up, and then kind of the next phase is the heyday of the ICO era, which we probably won't talk about today. But in my mind, that was when it was a new but established platform and technology, Ethereum, kind of generally acknowledged by some of the public, but big businesses as well, and had sort of transitioned. It was almost in the position of incumbent at that point. Now, I don't quite recall, like, what, maybe if I flip this to market cap, like, when did Ethereum, move up the ranks? It'd be good to know what was the big ranks, crypto coins, or however you want to call them at that time. Like for a while, Litecoin was number 2, right?
Yeah.
And
I think Ripple was up there.
XRP was usually 3 or something. And I don't even know where Litecoin is today, but I'd have to check when the actual crossover happened. Ethereum would be solidly number 2 for a long time. But maybe we should, maybe I'll can I figure that out right now? I forget how to overlay the prices on coin market cap, or the market caps rather. So we've never seen the flip just yet, but it got close at different times in this journey. So anyway, I think we could probably leave it there. Slightly shorter than the last episode, it appears. But I don't know, any final words, Vic, Jim, from this interesting time period in many people's lives, our lives?
I think it was just like, looking back, it seems that I think if you look back on successful projects, there's sort of that survivorship bias that, all the elements were just there. And you can see a lot of the elements there, but I don't think in any way that success was predetermined. Like, I think there was a lot
of coordinated effort, right? A lot of
a
people
lot
working
of
hard
effort
on
went
it
into it.
together,
Yeah.
getting the pieces to make it happen, so to speak.
I mean, it's
Exactly.
dangerous to look back in time and say like I knew that was going to happen, but I will say that even before the launch, I remember feeling that I'd never seen such a large group of people so excited about a particular project as that one. So, yeah, it felt like it was going to be successful.
Yeah, I just mean that, we've mentioned a bunch of the people that I think they all contributed to the success of the key point, even though they weren't, the founders of Ethereum. Like they made something happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing. It's like, are you being tossed in a great wave, or can you will reality into existence? And it's like, I tend to think of it as a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not all hot air from us because we literally
We did some of
our
it.
lives. This was going to be a successful technology. So
Yeah. Anyways, all right, let's close it there. Thanks everybody for listening this far, if you make it this far on the second one. And yeah, it'd be interesting to, we might continue this series. We could also kind of delve in on any particular part of it. Maybe we'll get a guest, maybe we'll do something. So if anyone wants us to cover anything particular, please do let us know.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
thank you.